Hi everyone, we're just going to give it a few minutes to allow people time to join the call. All right, we're at 12:02, so let's get it started. So, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining our Neuro-Inclusivity in the Workplace webinar. This session is being recorded and will be available for later viewing. I'm Adam Harper from Harvey Nash, part of the NASHability Group, a global specialist in technology recruitment and talent solutions. I'm also a proud member of NASHability, our Disabilities Employee Resource Group, advocating for individuals with physical and mental disabilities, as well as their carers. This topic is especially personal to me, as I have been diagnosed with autism and ADHD. The idea for this webinar was sparked by our Employer's Guide to Neurodiversity, a resource that Georgie and I have been developing for the last 12 months, which I'll briefly touch upon at the end of the webinar. I'm really excited to hear from our expert panel, and I hope you are too. While diversity and inclusion has gained momentum over the years, neurodiversity remains an often overlooked aspect of the conversation. By fostering neuro-inclusive workplaces, we're creating environments that are adaptable, innovative, and high-performing for everyone. So, what is neurodiversity? Neurodiversity refers to the natural variations in the human brain that result in different ways of thinking, learning, and processing information. It includes a range of diagnoses, from autism and ADHD to lesser-known conditions like dyscalculia, dyslexia, dyspraxia, and Tourette's, amongst others. So it's estimated that 15 to 20% of the UK population is neurodivergent, with roughly 10 to 13.8 million people. So it's likely that many of you have a family member, a friend, or a colleague who is neurodivergent, which underscores the importance of this conversation. So considering that only 29% of people with autism were employed in 2021, that's actually an alarmingly low statistic, and it demonstrates how employers are missing out on a vast, untapped talent pool with so much potential. Factors such as limited awareness, education, and training in neurodiversity creates barriers for neurodivergent individuals entering the workforce. It's often thought that inclusivity is something HR is solely responsible for, but it's a collective responsibility. Whether you are a CEO or an entry-level employee, through education and action, we can ensure everyone has a fair chance to thrive in the workplace. So now I'm pleased to welcome our esteemed panelists and our moderator, Georgie. Each brings a unique perspective to this discussion, and they will introduce themselves in a few moments. So today's webinar will be structured into 3 parts. First, the panel discussion, which will be 40 to 45 minutes, where the panelists will explore 3 key themes. What is neuro-inclusivity? Why is it important for both businesses and individuals? And how can we effectively promote inclusion of neurodiverse talent? Then we will have a live Q&A, which will be 10 minutes. We have opened up the live questions feature on Teams. You can submit your questions at any time throughout the webinar, and you can also post anonymously if you choose so. And then finally, I will wrap up the webinar with some brief closing remarks. So now I'll pass the floor to Georgie and our panelists for their introductions.
Thanks very much, Adam. So, yeah, my name's Georgie. I'm a senior consultant in Harvey Nash and part of NASHability, our ERG. Why is it important to me that we talk about this topic? I'm neurodiverse. My daughter's neurodiverse. She's got a lot of different complex needs. And when she comes to joining the workforce, I want her to have as many opportunities as she can. I don't want there to be barriers for her. And I think it's important that everybody has that experience as well. So we're going to kick off by everybody introducing themselves because they can do a much better job of it than I can. So should we start with Meri?
Sure. Hi, I'm Meri Williams. My pronouns are they, them. I'm autistic and ADHD, so I'm neurodiverse myself, but I lead large engineering organizations, so many of my team tend to be neurodiverse as well. I'm the CTO at Pleo, and I chair the Lead Dev Conference, which is a technology leadership conference, and we're talking a lot in that sphere about neurodiversity as well.
Thanks so much. Tony?
Hi, yeah, my name is Tony Fagelman. I'm a senior or program director for Xerox, but more importantly for this call, I am the global president of Enable All, which is the Xerox ERG for disabilities, for people with disability. I'm not neurodivergent myself. My son is. He has dyspraxia and OCD. But copes well with that following some work we did when he was younger. I'm also a trampoline coach, and I coach disabled or people with disabilities who are doing trampolining. I have a lot of neurodivergent gymnasts in that group, and working with those is always a joy. So I have multiple hats that I'm wearing that I bring to the table within the work environment, within the home environment, and within the play environment.
Thanks very much, Tony. Russell, do you want to go next?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. So I'm Russ Botting, Neuroinclusion Service Director at Auticon UK. My pronouns are he, him. Much like Tony, I've got a blend of the professional and personal connections to neurodivergence. So my background is in clinical psychology. I worked for 10 years across different NHS services, adult mental health, specialist autism and learning disability services, and also worked in a diagnostic service for autism. At Auticon, I supervise our coaching team who support our consultants. I also oversee a delivery of our Neuro-Inclusion service projects. I'm not neurodivergent myself, but I have family members that are currently going through the diagnostic process for autism and ADHD respectively as well.
Thanks for sharing, Russell. So Kate, do you want to go next?
Sure, thanks, Georgie. So I work in financial services, technology specifically, and fintech transformation, having worked in a completely different industry before. My pronouns are she and her. I'm an ally. I probably am neurodivergent, but never been diagnosed. My daughter definitely is. It's only in the last 2 years, and she's just turned 18, that she's taken her headphones off, which has been a really big step in terms of her overwhelm for noise. And also she's extremely dyslexic. So from that perspective, I think a number of other people have touched on it. Meri, I know your experience has been in that space about how do you create environments that enable people to really thrive and bring their best to the fore in terms of how they engage in a workplace and how they express themselves more generally. I've always been a huge fan of diversity across all its lenses, and I think it's a very natural progression to bring that neurodiverse aspect and that neurodivergent aspect into the discussion. My last employer, Macquarie, had a neurodivergency ERG, and that really, for me, as well as watching my daughter and the various struggles, and members of my team, engineers and technicians, they're all very, across lots of different spectrums. It's been fascinating to watch that grow and also see both sides of it as a slight outsider, both in terms of people's engagement with neurodivergent people, but also the neurodivergence benefits and the struggles that are experienced by those particular colleagues.
Yeah, thanks, Kate. And Sophie, do you want to finish this off?
Yes, I'm the Chief Risk and Compliance Officer at GIB Asset Management. We're a boutique asset manager based in London. We are 130 people strong, and we offer sustainability solution and really seek to embed sustainability in everything that we do. And part of it was a cultural journey with diversity, equity, and inclusion at its heart. And like others, I am an ally rather than someone with a direct lived experience of neurodivergence, but I have chaired the D&I forum for GIB and also been part of this diversity, equity, and inclusion journey with them, and therefore have experienced, what we can do even in smaller organization in that regard. And I've had the joy and the privilege of hearing of people who are very inspiring in that space.
Yeah, thanks so much. Thanks for all the introductions. So I think we can all agree that we've got a really diverse panel here with a lot of experience, and whether that's personal or they've got someone close by or a colleague, it's all really valuable. So I think it's important that we talk before we explore why neuro-inclusivity is so important. We take a step back and we define, what does this really mean? What does it look like, especially when it comes to the workplace? So I think let's start with the basics. Russell, how would you define neuro-inclusivity?
Thanks, Georgina. So the definition for me of neuro-inclusion in the context of work is about true equitable experience. So for those who identify as neurodivergent, as well as those who may not know yet that they may identify as neurodivergent, but may benefit from support, because I think that's important. It's not necessarily supporting individuals that know that they are neurodivergent, but those that may benefit from support and not maybe going through a diagnostic process, or may just benefit from additional support. I think the reason why neuro-inclusion exists is because historically neurodivergent individuals have faced significant barriers to employment, often due to societal misconceptions about what support people may need, as well as employers' perhaps limited understanding of how such support needs may vary between people, and even more importantly, how to harness those strengths of
absolutely
at work. So I think Adam's alluded to 29% of autistic adults are unemployed but don't match their academic qualifications according to the Office of National Statistics. We also see kind of stigma is quite pervasive. So there's lots of different articles around ADHD and the perception of negative messages that people receive by the age of 12. Again, that pervades into the workplace. And even more recently, we saw the Buckland Review last year on autism employment that found that 6 in 10 neurodivergent employees reported a negative reaction response from their manager to the disclosure. So that just gives you a sense of the experience that neurodivergent individuals have and the barriers that they face in terms of having their support needs met.
Yeah.
But I think rather than just trying to seek for everyone to conform to societal norms, inclusion in the context of work is about understanding that people have different needs, different experiences, and importantly have different strengths that they can bring to the workplace.
Yeah, absolutely. And Tony, I can see you've got your hand up there.
Yeah, I think it's really important that we help our leaders to understand what's going on. And if our leaders are neurodivergent, that they disclose that. Recently, at the one conference that we held last year in Washington for all the ERGs in Xerox, one of our senior leaders admitted to wrong words, explained that they believed they had a neurodivergent experience. They are neurodivergent themselves. Their daughter had just recently been diagnosed at 16 years old, and they recognized the same traits that the daughter had in them. And they, at the conference, they explained this to the staff, the people that were there, which no one knew. And that was, I thought that was groundbreaking that one of our senior leaders did that. And because of that, the way Xerox is now positioning itself and what we're doing is so key now to understanding and to expanding our neurodivergent workforce. Neurodiversity within Xerox is one of the key pillars this year of Enable All. So again, my ERG is looking to expand that, make that available to everybody, that understanding, that level of inclusion, and that ability to be authentic yourself.
Yeah, I think that's really important when you come to work, is having that ability to be able to be authentic. It's really valuable. And Meri, I can see that you've been viciously shaking, nodding your head whilst we've been talking. Did you have any thoughts on this?
I mean, I think the other thing that's always worth remembering is that a lot of the things that we can do to make life easier for our neurodivergent colleagues also help everybody else, right? So one of the things that lots of neurodiverse folks say is having written instructions to go with verbal instructions is helpful. That isn't only helpful if you're neurodivergent, it's helpful if you've got hearing issues, it's helpful if you have any other form of attention issue. If you just, your internet blipped at the wrong moment in a Zoom call, it can really help you to have stuff written down. For a lot of people, having better contrast helps, not just folks who are dyslexic, but anybody with vision issues. And so I think that a lot of this we can frame as being helpful for everyone and enabling for our neurodiverse colleagues.
Yeah, I agree. Sophie, did you have your hand up?
Just wanted to add, as this is very much the case with many diversity and inclusion issues, but that one in particular made me laugh, Meri, because this is also the case for many women going through perimenopause, that having written instruction is indeed very helpful.
Yeah, I agree. So I think moving on then from topic one. Oh, sorry, Kate, did you have some final thoughts on that one?
Oh no, I was just going to say in terms of that sort of real world examples and common misconceptions, especially as we're all going back to the office, I think open plan offices can be overwhelming, irrespective of where you are and who you are. Post-COVID, people who maybe didn't find it overwhelming beforehand are now finding it overwhelming. The level of noise from an open plan office that you get and experience, and also just so that's kind of how do we lift and enable everyone. I mean, I love sitting in one of those little sort of soundproof cubicles, although the hum of the aircon is always a little bit weird. But I think being able to really have open, transparent conversations, and Tony earlier was just like, oh, wrong word. I think if we can be in safe places where we can have discussions with people and their experiences across the board, using the words that we have, that we don't know better until we know better, right? And then we can do better. But having empathy and encouragement from all sides to use the words that we have, come together in a sense of willingness and wanting to be and do better, then we can have more understanding. Because if people have limited exposure, either unknowingly or knowingly, there are lots of people in the workplace that don't wish to disclose whether it's their sexual orientation or their neurodivergence or whatever it is, and they certainly shouldn't be forced to do so if they're not comfortable doing so. But again, if we're creating environments that as Meri mentioned, do all these different things for everybody, then people can approach that as they like. But there's so many misconceptions about what does autism look like, or what is dyslexia like. So for example, my daughter, as a real world example, we were having discussions when she was 6 or 7 about whether with the school they were like, oh, does dyslexia run in your family? And we're like, no, having not really had any experience of dyslexia on any scale that we were aware of. And yet to the point that I think it was Tony making earlier, that someone gets diagnosed in your family and you're like, oh, I recognize those aspects of it. Everything's on a scale. Tourette's isn't necessarily the extreme end of a scale, or it can be more things than just whatever films or reality TV may have shown us.
Yeah.
And really being able to have those engagements with people. My mother was busy going, no way that child's dyslexic. She had a reading age of 16 when she was 9. And to my mother, being dyslexic was an inability to read words on a page. Well, that's not the aspect of dyslexia that she has at all. Hers is around processing and doing lots of processes all at the same time. It just overwhelms her brain. and she phases out. So I think the more that we can all come together and have these really good conversations in an open and sharing safe way, the better we're all going to be about how do we solve for that? How do we embrace the different aspects of it?
Yeah, I think your point as well about it's not, you don't always look neurodiverse is really true. I always have that comment when I disclose to somebody that I am neurodiverse. It's we don't look it. It's what does that look like? You know what I mean? So yes. So now that we've unpacked, sorry, my lights decided to go off. Now that we've unpacked what neuro-inclusivity means, then let's explore why it's actually so important. And I think it's important for individuals, but it's also important for businesses as well. So, Sophie, what are some of the biggest benefits for a business who operates within a neuro-inclusive workplace?
Well, it's so important for businesses that in financial services, our regulators have made it a regulatory concern. And to answer your question, therefore, as a Chief Risk and Compliance Officer, I inspired myself of what regulators have found on the issue. So what they have found and what they are trying to communicate to the industry is that greater diversity, in particular cognitive diversity, reduces groupthink. And that is really important because it enhances decision making, which itself leads to better risk management. And that drives, as we know, higher long-term performance for organization, right? So so that is a business case that will speak to the heart of the most commercially aware and business-focused leaders out there. What they also say is that increasing level of diversity and inclusion can help unlock talent, so widen our talent pool. That also can help increase competitiveness and attractiveness of our sectors, but that reads across many different sectors, I'm sure. And importantly, it helps us understand the needs and characteristics and objective of our clients. So it leads to better customer outcomes. So again, a very commercially driven factor here. And we talked about speaking up, safe spaces. It's really important to think about a good, healthy work culture that enhance psychological safety and the ability to speak up. We know that this is how, as well, issues are identified and corrected. There can be all sorts of issues, people behavior with each other, but also, more financially related issues. So I think, that is a very strong case indeed. But when we look at the partner that they've worked with, to bring this message of diversity and inclusion in the financial services, they worked with lots of different groups. One that I think is quite interesting is the Diversity Project. We found that there were 41% of people identified as autistic and 45 people identified as ADHD in financial services. So it's believed that there are more people with neurodivergencies in financial services, which is quite an interesting findings. But it's all with lots of question marks, because to your point, we don't have lots of data in the absence of lots of disclosures, and it's found that only 21% of large firms and 4% of small firms actually collect the data. But in any case, we know that if we better support diverse, equitable, and inclusive culture, we can make ourselves more attractive for employees, but also for investors in our organization, and in our case also complying with regulatory expectation. And from a brand perspective as well, it's just not the talent pool, the people you're trying to appeal to, but also your clients, of course. And what I know is that in asset management, a lot of institutional clients would ask about our culture and diversity inclusion as part of their request for proposal, as part of their due diligence on our organization, because they believe that it will drive a better service for them.
Yeah, I think that having that open culture is really important. Tony, I can see that you've got your hand up.
Yeah, so just a couple of things really. I just want to just talk about disclosure. Our experience, and again, reading all the notes around this, it seems that 71% of people will not disclose they have a disability of any kind. And the reasons they put for that is that they do not wish to be labeled by their managers or their peers that may impact their ability to work or ability to progress within the organization. So therefore, we have to address that as an organization, as any organization, we have to address that. And as much as we say this is a safe space, it is the actions of the business that have to say that this is going to make a change. Obviously, we're looking over the pond and we're looking over the US and we're seeing DEI infrastructure being rolled back, and all those huge companies, saying, okay, we have to look at how we're presenting this. Here in the UK, actually, I think we're in a much better space. I think, we have a message to take forward and a message to drive. And I think that is absolutely the biggest thing we can do as ERGs, as spokespeople, as employees, and as managers. So that's the first thing I want to say. The other thing I just want to mention is about spectrum. It's really important to remind ourselves that within the operations of any business, there are various levels. And we as an organization, we take on people to work in post rooms, we take on people to work in mail rooms, to service our devices, all the way up to and in between, our CEOs, our senior leaders, our managers, senior managers working in various aspects of the business. And we've got a very diverse business within Xerox. That means we have this opportunity to employ across the piece. Yeah, let's not be, it's all going to be about the management, it's all going to be about our doers and thinkers. Actually, there are people in the population who we need to bring in to support them at a lower level and mid-level. And that is absolutely key to improve the business, as Sophie said, across the piece. And that diversity is absolutely where we want to be.
Yeah, I think it really can help businesses' reputation when they really are advocates in this space, genuine advocates in this space. And I think, obviously, I'm neurodiverse myself, and I would definitely recommend Harvey Nash as an example for being a safe space to talk about these sorts of topics and for no judgment. And I think that only can help a business if that's the position that they're in. So I think we've kind of talked a little bit about businesses. I mean, Kate, how does neuro-inclusivity directly benefit employees but also job seekers as well? What's your thoughts?
So I think, we've touched on some of the aspects about being neurodivergent and the environments and the barriers in terms of being employed, but in terms of how, when it goes right and how it's important, I think you look at places like GCHQ who go out of their way to employ dyslexic analysts, leveraging exceptional pattern recognition and their ability to sort of really solve complex intelligence problems, or even I think EY have got centers of excellence where they're again looking at dedicated teams of neurodivergent staff to work on analytics and cybersecurity projects. And I think this is why we find so many neurodivergent colleagues within financial services. It's the patterns, it's the numbers, it's the ability to sort of hyper focus on something and really creating environments where individuals can thrive rather than just survive. How do we look at, for individuals, how do we make sure that they've got plans for how they're going to grow their career path that are aligned to their talents and their particular skills? How do we create flexible schedules so it's not just a mandated you have to work like this or have to work like something else? But I think looking at whether it's the user interfaces and experiences, and again coming back to that piece that we talked about earlier, when we have all these different insights in a room, where we have all these different needs or challenges being surfaced in a room, everybody lifts together. I think if you look at, I think it's is it JP Morgan? They looked at their sort of autism at work program, and they changed the way of sort of redesigned their hiring process. So I, for example, I had an interview the other week, and I like crashed and burned. I am rubbish at interviews, you know, the whole give me a star structure and, you know, tell me about a time that, you know, that very traditional format. I'm appalling at it. You know, I much prefer having a conversation about my work style or what I bring or how I deliver things. I really crashed and burned. So bizarrely, the employer was like, yeah, you were tragic. You know, we recognize you're really good and we recognize you're all of these things and you could add huge amounts of benefit, but you failed at the interview. So you might want to get better at your interview technique. I think that thing that says as individuals, you know, JP Morgan have replaced traditional interviews with work simulations that say, actually, how are we understanding that these people engage, how they work, how they are curious, what they bring to the jigsaw of all of us together. You know, those kind of things are extraordinary, and watching that come to life is a fabulous thing as a team leader, as a CIO, when I don't fail the interview, is extraordinary. It's such a joy, it's such a privilege to see everybody shining and really thriving and being excited to come to work. It's something that they get to do, not something that they have to do.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think, Russell, I know you work with a lot of different individuals as part of your role at Auticon. Have you got any, advice on how a lack of neuro-inclusivity can affect an individual in the workplace?
Well, yeah, I mean, as we've already alluded to, if you think about kind of the communication that people may benefit from in the workplace, I think, you know, if as Kate's alluded to, as part of the interview process, it is essentially a social construct, right? It's how we currently feel that we can assess someone's ability to manage elements of a work environment. However, it doesn't cater for kind of ambiguity in language, like such ambiguity in how interview questions are asked, but also it's not real world applicable. So in the field of research, you have something called ecological validity. How real world applicable is that research? And if you think about interviews, how applicable are they to a role? And what we would encourage is for interviewers and organizations to include elements of real world applicable tasks, presentations. It doesn't necessarily have to be all about question and answer interview style, but are there any different spreadsheet, kind of going through a spreadsheet, kind of working on coding that person will need to actually do in that role that can give that employer tangible information about how that individual performs in that particular role, rather than asking ambiguous questions about where they see themselves in 10 years, or can they speak about what their kind of successes are and weaknesses are. These kind of questions are very ambiguous, and how you interpret them is totally open to your experiences. But for an neurodivergent individual, they may interpret it that totally differently, not because they don't have the skills, but because of the way that the interview questions are phrased. But that's just a very small example. You know, we always talk about, I think, generally a neuro-inclusive approach in interviews is always about communication, giving people clear details, clear information, clear instructions, but this aligns to the onboarding process as well. So clear instructions, a timetable, what that person can expect, who they're going to be speaking to, who will give them that information, having a buddy during the first week or first month.
I think
so there's loads of different elements.
Sorry to cut you off, Russell. We're a bit tight for time. We're going to move on to that in topic 3. So we'll move straight on, and in a minute. Meri, do you want to finish that topic off before we move on? No? Okay. So yeah, we've talked about why it's viable for both businesses and individuals. I think we've come across quite a lot of different points that show how important it is. So yeah, topic 3, how do we actually go about doing it? Because it's all well and good saying how important it is, but if we're not talking about how we're going to do it, it's hard to move forward. So Tony, what are some of the tangible steps that companies can actually take here to make it more inclusive?
So absolutely going out there. I mean, it says on the chat, maybe not use the words disclose, but, make it aware that you are, as an organization, open to work effectively. Anybody and everyone is welcome to apply. We are disability confident within Xerox. We're applying for the next stage up, which means that, if you do disclose, using that word again, if you do disclose that you have a disability of any kind, you are considered differently in that your application, if you meet the criteria, you will get an interview. Because what we're trying to say is, what you say on your CV or in your application is not necessarily relevant, because you may struggle to put down the information that you need to do to actually get through the barrier of those processes, which is, I think, is exactly what Russell was talking about. So make it easy. That's the first thing. Make it easy for people to get into you.
Yeah, really true. And Meri, I've noticed you put something in the chat about Monzo. Did you want to talk us through that?
No, it was just an example that when I was at Monzo, one of the things the team did was they realized that our office was near Liverpool Street, and it's an especially noisy and chaotic station. And so we put a kind of very detailed, this is how you get to us, and this is what you're going to encounter along the way, and suggested people bring their noise cancelling headphones, and said, if you want to arrive early so that you can calm down after dealing with traveling and that kind of stuff, then you were able to. And it just changed how welcomed people felt. And I just completely agree with what Tony said. I think it's on us to create an environment where people feel comfortable to share, and that they actually will get help if they share. They're not just going to get ostracized. I think that's very true.
Yeah, I think once we've actually hired neurodivergent individuals, what are some of these key strategies that we can implement to make sure that they feel supported but not picked on, not ostracized? I think I've seen a few messages in the chat. Did you want to finish us off on that, Meri?
Well, just an example that we've got at Pleo now, we have an ERG, so for neurodiverse folks, which we've called ourselves Scatterbrains, and it's a Slack channel, and there's just a load of support from folks across the spectrum of neurodiversity. And so one of the things that's been quite beautiful is to see someone who's ADHD pairing up with someone who's autistic and struggles with identifying emotions. And so the autistic person struggles with identifying emotions, the ADHD person struggles with being overwhelmed by other people's emotions. And they've actually formed this really wonderful partnership leading the group, and sharing, prompts every week for people to share what's challenging for them, what accommodations are helping them. We as a group went and said, hey, we want some of the tools that help us to manage our work better. Let's do that as a group together to go through the procurement process and everything. So it's not each of us individually having to fight these barriers. It's us as a group collectively doing that. And so I think there's a big role for employee resource groups to play in that way of, nothing about us without us, I think is the phrase.
Yeah, I love that.
I tend to use.
Yeah, that's so true. Sophie, your hand was raised.
Yes, we mentioned intersectionality before and how it was important to look at neurodivergence in the, the bigger picture of diversity and inclusion. And Russell, your example of having a work-based exercise, in an interview process, I feel, is also a very good way of really have more effective interviews and make sure you really understand, what skills and experience you're bringing to the organization. So I feel is another one that works on many levels. But I think there are many, different tactics that can be put in place for people's work to be workplace to be enhanced. But it's also really important to embed diversity and inclusion in a strategic manner. And part of it is also your governance aspect, you know, your committees, your governance committees, how they're responsible for ensuring, you know, that the culture is robust, that there's a real strategy behind diversity and inclusion, and, you know, your policies, making sure people are protected with policies and reassured by policies. And there is the whole aspect of measuring and reporting. I mean, we already mentioned, obviously, how measuring can be challenging sometimes when it relies on people being willing to share. But there are lots of ways that we can measure how a culture is diverse and inclusive, and therefore, you know, gives people the best opportunity to thrive and feel a deep sense of belonging.
Yeah, I think the policy piece is really important. I know that I've had issues with the policies, for example, with my daughter at her education. I know it's not quite workplace, but it translates. And if the policies were more understanding of how neurodivergent needs can impact a person, I think it would make a big difference. Tony, do you want to finish us off on this topic?
Yeah, I think just with the return to the office, as has been discussed earlier, you know, you have to look at those offices. You know, there's been a lot of change within office environments. And, you know, I was part of a group that was looking at the office structures and what can we do. We talked about those booths that are there. That works for some people. It also actually scares the living daylights out of others who are claustrophobic or something like that. So, you know, you've got to get the office mix right. And if you can create that environment where people are comfortable coming back into the office, as well as the comforts that they have working from home, then you generate an environment for everybody. And this is absolutely the only way we can take that, whether you are physically disabled, whether you have a neurodivergent requirement, whether you have an invisible disability that we talked about. Someone was saying, you know, you don't look ill, you don't look like you've got a problem. Well, actually, yeah, I am. Sorry about that, but this is who I am. But we have to be able to put that in place, put those structures in place, put those support measures in place. If we do all of that, our workplace is open to everybody and everybody feels comfortable in doing what they're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a really nice note to kind of bring us to an end on the three topics that we wanted to discuss. So we're going to move on now to our Q&A. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat. I'm just going to get up and make the light turn back on.
You're actually okay, Georgina. It's you're quite lit by your screen even when it's off, so you don't have to worry too much.
It's on now. Silly, you know, sense of things. So let's look at the Q&A.
Lots of engagement where we were talking, lots of written engagement on the chat.
It's funny, my one of the cultures at Pleo is that when we have a big all hands or whatever, there's always the chat going at the same time. And so we've gotten very good at kind of keeping up with the questions and keeping up with the commentary whilst still also presenting. I tend to do summaries because I struggle with listening without taking notes, so I take notes and now I post them, and there's a running joke at my company that it's Meri AI because I apparently post summaries very quickly, and I'm like, there's no AI involved. It's just for me to pay attention because I'm ADHD. I have to take notes.
AI is quite helpful though. So question 1, we have a neurodiverse peer circle, which is an offshoot of the disability affinity group. We engage with this group regularly to engage them on work we are delivering to ensure we're being inclusive. It's been a game changer for us. That's really good to hear. And as a group, they pull on each other and they share experiences. Do you think that business leaders are starting to understand the benefits of diverse colleagues? Who wants to take that one? Can I come in there? Yeah.
So I think, first of all, brilliant that you've got an ERG for disabilities, and B, a spin-off. You know, we're looking at something very similar within Xerox. I think as the global president, I have the ear of the SLT. My own senior exec is the president of Europe. So I find myself in an environment where I can talk to these senior leaders and ask them about how we go forward. The problem you get is not the senior leader buy-in. You get that. They see it, they want it. What you actually get a problem with is the management below them supporting them, saying, oh, you can't accept that. You can't admit to doing that. You can't say we're going to do that, because you're committing the entire company to a process or a route that actually the company hasn't discussed, because just because the CEO says, oh yeah, we're going to do that. So you have to have that ability, yes, to talk to senior management, but you have to also be able to take to their management team below them and say, no, this is something the group has got to take forward. So yes, make sure it happens, get to the senior management, but you've got to get that communications all the way through.
Just to add to that, I would agree. It's really important to get senior leadership buy-in. I think that's fundamental, and I think what we've alluded to thus far is it actually at the moment it's individuals who are allies, have advocates, and have personal experience. We often see whether it's CTOs, CEOs having that lived experience, that personal experience, either themselves, their children, and they are the driving force internally, and that filters them down into organizations. So where we want to get to is, however long that takes, is a position where actually organizations understand the value of neuro-inclusion from the senior leadership perspective, but without necessarily that connection. That's where we want to get to. But yes, we are seeing change in organizations, but there's always more that we can be doing.
I think we'll move on to the next question, and Kate, I'll throw it to you. How would you approach enacting change if it clashes with a company policy? Sometimes companies can mandate or camera on meetings, for example, especially when people aren't comfortable disclosing and going through some sort of reasonable accommodations process. What's your advice?
So I think we've already touched on the sort of how do you sort of having a general conversation with any new starter that says, how do you like to work? How do I engage with you best? How do you engage with me best? That there are all so many different styles within each of the teams that we have. I've completed some time ago, are you red, amber, green, or blue? I think are the two different, the various colors of your personality. Of, these are the things that I'm good at. These are the things that I'm less good at. These are the things that I'm going to get up and walk away from if you engage with me like this, or you use this complete sort of way of working. And that was just on a personality, are you extrovert, introvert, do you like to share everything, or do you just like to have those transactional conversations and keep going? So I think inherently just having those conversations is really helpful. It's always been really helpful. Meri, I would love to understand from you, if it's okay, in terms of that broader piece and the middle management conundrum, which is, I think, where everything goes to die, irrespective of the people at the coalface and the people who know it's a really good idea. The stuff in the middle is like, looking at sort of that corporation piece that says, okay, now we're going to put it on everyone's balanced scorecards, which on one level is like, is that forcing disclosure? And again, coming back to that piece of some people don't want to share. Maybe it's because they feel that where they are on their spectrum isn't as severe as maybe somebody else, and we don't want to take resource away from those individuals who maybe need it more. But equally, if it's a case of how do we actually get through that middle layer, Meri, your lived experience and the ways in which you've seen it manifest, I would love to just hear your perspective on that, particularly from the larger corporate. How do we change it?
Yeah, so the thing I tend to do is run a series of workshops around 3 questions, and the 3 questions are, am I expected here, am I respected here, and can I be myself and be successful here? And I think when you ask those questions, is someone like me even expected to apply here, is one of the things that comes out, right? I've got a physical disability as well. I've literally never interviewed anywhere where if I'd been in a wheelchair that day, I'd have been able to get into the interview room. And my disability is variable. I've got Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. All my joints dislocate. Some days I'm on crutches. Some days I can walk. Some days I can't. And it's been actually much harder to get the physical disability side of things accommodated than anything else. But I think asking, for people for middle managers to sit and go, You know, can I show that all different types of people are expected in my team? Can I show that they'll be respected if they're in my team? They're not going to be treated like their difference is a negative, but that their difference is a feature rather than a bug. And then are a lot of different people going to be able to be themselves and be successful? And I think when you reframe it as your job is to make these three things true for a wide number of people, that then becomes a mission that a manager can undertake, and it's a lot less nebulous than if you're just going, let's be more neuro-inclusive, and a lot of people don't know what that means or don't realize that it might mean something very different. You know, I'm autistic and ADHD, written instructions really help me. If I were severely dyslexic, maybe it would be terrible to have written instructions. If I were, you know, a different, there are different modalities, right, that we need to accommodate. And so I agree, helping to make individual conversations go well, helping to make the clear commitment at the top. But then in the middle, it's all about making these managers realize that part of what their job is to create the environment for success for this broad range of people. And I think that's where we're missing on a lot of this. And some of that is because middle managers are under pressure. We're in a world where we're thinning organizations, we're losing that slack and that capacity to deal with these things better. But Sophie, I can see your hands up as well.
Yeah, I was going to go back to the subject of middle management, because to your point, Meri, you know, we've been slightly critical of them, and I feel it's slightly unfair, because although it's really important that to understand that culture is not just done from the top, it's behavior at scale, and therefore it takes everybody to make an inclusive culture. You know, just saying it's because they don't understand or they don't believe, I feel is a little bit maybe only half of the story. It's also being equipped, it's also being supported, right? So everybody needs support to be part of that work. One thing that we've done at GIB Asset Management that worked really well was a reverse mentoring program. I saw that mentoring was also mentioned in the chat as being an important element to include, you know, consideration of neurodivergence in mentoring program. But reverse mentoring is one way that we can help people in with line management responsibility to really understand what the experiences of people in minoritized group, in particular with neurodivergence. And I know that the managers that have participated in our program found it really insightful, and the people who were the, you know, the mentee learned a lot and seemed to have really changed their behaviors as a result. So it may be one way that we can really drive this dialogue at all levels of the organization.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll have one final question then. And it's from our very own Justin, actually, who works at Harvey Nash. Has anyone in the panel had to deal with dissent from other employees that might resent the allowances made for a neurodiverse employee? And if so, how was this managed?
So yes, I've had to deal with that. And I think that you have this general risk that whenever you do anything to level the playing field for one group, there are other groups that may feel that they're being disadvantaged by that. There's a fantastic quote, which is, if you're accustomed to privilege, then equality can feel like oppression. And I think that's very true. So my experience has been that it's more about going, do you understand what the lived experiences of these folks? And therefore, once you do, then you go, oh, okay, this isn't special treatment. This is making it possible for someone to perform the same as anybody else. And so, like I got a late diagnosis with autism and ADHD. I suspected the autism and didn't have any idea about the ADHD. But I talk to people now about how, you know, it's like having 100 tabs open in a browser and not being able to choose which tab to focus on. And now I take meds and the meds let me choose which tab to focus on. That's all it does for me. It makes it possible for me to do something that a neurotypical person can do without thinking. And so it's not special treatment, it's just equal treatment, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Russell, do you want to finish us off and then we'll move to closing remarks?
Yeah, I just aligned to everything Meri said. I think we often talk about this logical fallacy that we often see when we speak to kind of organizations about, if we make this adjustment here, what might other people say? And actually that is not borne out by evidence. I'd like to see a study that does, and that is, but often there is this automatic assumption that if certain adjustments are given, that others may be distrustful of that, and that people may be implementing adjustments unnecessarily, which is just not the case. And the argument is that perhaps that person, for whatever reason, felt they weren't able to request an adjustment, but is now doing so. So it's about the organisation understanding that individual's right to, under the Equality Act, to reasonable adjustments, but actually, as Meri rightly said, looking at the social model of disability and looking at how it's society's role in kind of the functioning of disability and the barriers that are created, particularly in society, but in the workplace, that leads to that experience of disability. And it's actually about society and other colleagues understanding why that person's lived experience and why that adjustment is so important, and how actually, so for example, if we think about things like agendas in meetings, that's a really simple universal accommodation, as we talked about earlier. It may not be something that necessarily someone needs as a reasonable adjustment potentially, but as an example, that is going to have a benefit for everyone, regardless of whether they needed it or not. But it's going to significantly impact and support someone that is neurodivergent, that may benefit from knowing exactly what they need to do, what their expectations are in a meeting, and can have the experience of reducing anxiety, stress, and all sorts of other additional elements that someone that isn't neurodivergent, they would never have thought about. They would never think about those kind of elements. So it's really important to understand that lived experience, and that's, I think, a really, really important, pertinent point.
Yeah. Absolutely. So I think that's the end of our Q&A today, because otherwise we're going to run over. But yeah, thank you everybody for sending your questions in. If we haven't answered a question and you guys really want it to be answered, then just drop myself or Adam an email and we will try our best to ask the panel and send you the response. So I'll pass over to Adam now for our closing remarks.
Hello again, everyone. If you can bear with me for 2 minutes, and you can all get back to your busy days. Thank you for engaging in today's discussion. We hope you leaving with some valuable takeaways, and a special thanks to our fantastic panelists for sharing their expertise, and to our moderator Georgie for steering such a thought-provoking discussion. As I mentioned earlier in the webinar, I'm really proud that we finally published our Employer's Guide to Neurodiversity, which many of the panelists have provided their input on, and I'm extremely grateful for. So thank you again. It's a first of its kind 26-page resource based on interviews we've conducted with 15 neurodiversity experts from leading universities, institutions, and non-profits across the UK and EU. It blends theory, first-hand accounts, and company case studies, discussing step-by-step strategies for implementing neuro-inclusive practices throughout the entire employee life cycle. Then one key focus of the guide that's often overlooked is the intersection of gender and neuro-inclusivity, exploring why women and non-binary individuals often face misdiagnosis, lack of support, and the barriers to leadership that this causes. And as a thank you for attending, we'll be sending all participants a copy of the guide in the coming days. We hope it empowers you to foster inclusion and support neurodivergent talent in your organizations. If you'd like to learn more about our neuro-inclusivity initiatives at Harvey Nash, or explore how we can support your organization on this journey, please don't hesitate to reach out to me, Georgie, or a member of the Harvey Nash team. So neuro-inclusivity isn't just a trend or a buzzword, it's the foundation for a transformative change that embraces diversity of thought, sparks innovation, and ensures everyone has a fair chance to thrive at work. Together, let's challenge traditional workplace paradigms, create environments where differences are celebrated, and make inclusivity the norm rather than an option. Thank you all again for joining us today, and have a great day.
Bravo, Adam.
Thanks, everyone.
Awesome.